I'm Rabbi Patrick, and welcome to Kehillah. So I titled this episode, A Synagogue for Tired People. A synagogue for tired people, and I suspect you might be one of them. Yeah, because here's the thing I want you to think about. Um, there's a lot of people right now that if you ask them, how are you energetically compared to your past? Like, let's say before 2020, you know, do you have more energy? Are you busier? Do you have less stress? And they'll say, I am tired. And so this is for you. But first, a couple of things that I need to let you know about. A few things for you. So, Rebbitzin. She's doing a Jewish prayer boot camp. So here's how this works. There's a bunch of sort of recordings and things like that that she's going to send out, and you're going to listen to them, watch them, all of that good stuff, read everything. And then there's going to be a class Thursday, November 6th in the evening at our house. And she's going to teach you stuff. So you're going to learn some things on your own, and you got to do the study in advance. And then you come to our house, and you could be someone who can follow along in a Shabbat service, and maybe not everything, maybe just the stuff we do at Kehillah, right? The sort of small stuff. But you could follow along, and you'd get what it's about. And you could even be someone who could lead it. So that's how that works. So Rebbitzin's Jewish Prayer Boot Camp. Very, very excited about that. Thursday, November 6th. And then home hosted Shabbat the next night. Dinner and service at Ellen and Ross's. You met Ellen and Ross at the holidays. They're some new folks that we just love having in the community. They live out in Short Pump, so we'd love to have you for that Friday, November 7th. And hey, think about it. If you learned a bunch of prayers the night before, then yeah, you should definitely come to the Shabbat service. That makes sense. And then how about the next day? How about Shabbat morning bagels and Torah study at our house in Midlothian, Saturday, November 8th. So you got some stuff to do. You got a nice little weekend there. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There's at least one thing that you could find that you might like to do. So let's get into our opening kavanah. You're sitting in your car, right? You're taking a little me time. Yeah, because maybe the car's the best place you can be, or you're sitting in the man cave, or you're in the sewing room, or you're on your couch, or you're driving to work and you're like, I just need something to get me through the day, or this is in the background of a Zoom meeting that you're pretending to pay attention to. All right, whatever it is, I want you to clear your mind. Take a few deep breaths and listen to these words that will totally confuse the heck out of you. Genesis 25, verse 28. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors. But Jacob became a mild man, a man of the tent. All right. Yeah. But that was really religious there for you. Okay. So part of the thing here is that this doesn't actually have the right English translation, like the perfect Hebrew to English translation. So let me give you some background, and then you can figure out how you want to translate this. And then I'm going to talk about a synagogue for tired people. So these are the children of Rebecca and Isaac. Okay. And they have twins. There's a lot of twin stuff in the Bible that's really interesting. There's like this preoccupation with twins. But you have these twins. Okay. And so you have Esau and you have Yaakov. Okay. And Esau and Yaakov are two very different kinds of personalities, which is what we have here in this particular verse. So Esau is a man of the land, meaning like the woods and things like that. He's a hunter. He's this like hairy type of guy. Sort of a dark character in some ways, but he's a master of this land, right? He's the kind of guy, he goes out in the woods and he gets some stuff done. Now his brother's a slightly different kind of cat. He's an indoor cat, you might say. He's called an Ish Tom. Okay, an Ish Tom. Ish is man, and Tom is kind of a whole horrible word because it's the word for like complete or perfect or sound or wholesome. Sometimes Tom is innocent is another way to think about it. And he's called a dweller of the tents. Tents, like, like a tent in the woods. Okay. Um, but the way this can be translated is that, Esau is like the outdoorsy guy who hunts. Jacob is the kind of guy who is a pastoralist, right? Like maybe he's raising animals, things like that. There's a sort of a legend that says that what Jacob was doing in the tents was that he was studying Torah. There's a whole kind of parallel way of thinking that actually the Torah was given to Noah and passed through the patriarchs and matriarchs. That's a whole other kind of whiz bang that we can get into in another time. But if you go further into the contemporary Torah JPS 2006, which I guess isn't all that contemporary anymore, so maybe contemporary Torah was not a good aging name, JPS, because time would go on and it would no longer be, contemporary. But it goes further and it says that Isaac favored Esau because of this quality of being this kind of outdoorsy guy. In English, they translate that to be that he has a taste for game. Um, but their mother is a little bit different. She favored Jacob, and there's a whole thing that happens around that, and it's a thing. But here's where this gets interesting. So sometimes the Jewish people are kind of stereotyped in this way, right? Of like, we're not the outdoorsy ones, we're not the hunters, we're not the explorers, we're not those people, right? We're the yeshivish guys, right? We're the people that are staying in school and getting master's degrees, and we're accountants and doctors and lawyers. We aren't working with our hands. We certainly aren't this insult term am haaretz, which means like um, country folk maybe, or maybe we might say in America, rednecks, right? So there's kind of this dichotomy of a way of understanding this particular verse. But Radak, so this is Rabbi David Kimchi, says this a little bit differently. He kind of gives an unusual commentary here. Um, what Radak basically says is that when you look at the brothers and you're comparing the two of them, as they grew up, they kind of diverged into two different types of activities. Um, one of whom showed more profitable immediate results, the other who didn't. But but basically, if you look at the English translation of what Radak says, is that one was an extrovert. He had his home in the fields and the mountains. Okay, so you can guess who that is. That's Esau. Whereas the other was an introvert. And this is reflected by the fact that it says that he dwells in tents. Okay. So, yeah. So we have these two different kinds of people. One is the being out there, catching it wild, that guy. And then you have the person who's kind of hanging out in the library where it's nice and quiet and no one's going to talk to him. And that lineage is where the Jewish people are going to come from, right? This is where we're going to eventually become Yisrael. Okay. So that's that. And we can just leave it there. But here's kind of the thing. I was thinking about this stereotype of the Jewish people as being, the book smart type, right? All of that, the quiet, hiding in the back, hiding out in the public library, staying in school, whatever, hiding in the tent, that sort of vibe. And I was thinking about this change in popular culture that I've noticed for the past, I don't know, like 8 years or so. So when I was a kid, it seemed like a lot of the characters that you would see in cartoons, movies, things like that, they were sort of extroverted types. And I remember when I was in school, the teachers, even though they claimed they didn't have favorites, they obviously had favorites. The favorites were always like the jocks, the football players, the most popular kids in school, things like that, right? And I've noticed over the years, there's been this trend towards a more inclusive way of looking at personality. One of those things is mental health, which is great. The other is that the extrovert, the most popular person in the room, the loud, the funny, that person isn't necessarily the dominant archetype of our media culture, right? Movies, TV shows, things like that. It seems like the introvert is becoming more of the character that we want to talk about and that we identify with. There's a lot of this kind of dark comedy that you see on like streaming things like Netflix, whatever, where it's sort of this person who feels like they're really out of place in the world and their relationships are a little sideways and they're kind of quiet and quirky and whatever, and watching these shows, it's not even like funny per se. It's just the awkwardness, like awkwardness as a kind of humor now. And not awkwardness as in, look at all of these awkward people, but rather awkward in the sense of watching an awkward character try to make their way through life. And where the moral of the story is not that this person needs to change themselves to fit in anymore, or that this person needs to learn from the people around them, but rather that the entire world around them is just nuts. It is just filled with all of these extroverted, loud-mouthed, jockey type people, right? And that the introvert is the only moral character in the story. Um, I kind of feel like for me, this started with the movie Ghost World, which is a really good independent film, Terry Zwigoff movie. Um, I absolutely loved it. He did a bunch of other kinds of movies. I want to say that American Splendor might have been one, but I don't know if that was him or not. I think it was him. I think Art School Confidential maybe was another. And if that's the case, I might be totally wrong. I think he did all three of those movies, but they all kind of have the same character. It's like, here's the weirdo in the normal environment, and the normal environment looks strange because we identify with the strange character. And I feel like sometime in the 60s and 70s began, and maybe even into the 80s, began this process of a little bit of these characters that we identify with because they don't fit in, or these characters that are kind of amoral. And we kind of like that. We kind of get into that for some reason. And that sort of started this process that leads us to today, where you have these characters in popular culture who just don't seem to get it. They just seem like they're a fish out of water all the time. And a lot of it has to do with this idea that the characters are introverts. And so now there's this kind of glamorizing of the introvert. Maybe in a way that certainly wasn't when I was a kid. Maybe you'd see a little taste of it. It doesn't really fully happen until we go from sort of standard characters to a little bit of the anti-hero stuff, and then a lot of the anti-hero stuff, and then finally, the introverts are the stars of the show. Maybe that's a good thing. I might give off the impression that I'm an extrovert. I'm not. I'm actually an introvert. There are times when I really just want to be left alone. Like I really just want to do my own thing. Now I rally because I love Kehillah. Like, I love it when people come to the house. I love showing up to something and seeing all of the people, all the volunteers, everyone who makes it possible. I am so, so, so into that. And also, I know that there are people in our community who it kind of takes a little bit of oomph to be able to get out the door, right? And maybe you're that kind of person. Maybe you're listening to this and you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Rabbi. You lost me at Men in the Tent. But, um, maybe you're one of these people that it just, you kind of have to psych yourself up a little bit. You're gonna have a good time, but it's just like, oh gosh, I have to have like small talk. Like maybe you even have talking points in your head. Maybe you take an extra 10 minutes in front of the mirror because you're like, okay, I can do this. I know this is good for me. I'm gonna see my friends. It's gonna be nice. But there's just this allure of the couch and the dog or the cat or the house plant, whatever, and Netflix. Oh my gosh, there's so much you can watch on Netflix. And so it just takes a minute. It takes a little extra something to be able to, you know, get out the door. The hardest part is turning on the keys in the ignition, right? And I get it. You are a man who dwells in the tent, as Radak would think about it. Okay. But here's the thing. So we have this kind of normalization of the introvert, this normalization of the quirky, in my case, geeky person who's, gonna whatever, go on to the, uh, go to this, event or go to this thing, maybe feel like, okay, it takes me a second. Okay. So it's great that we have that person now, that person is an archetype and that we can see ourselves in that person and we can think of ourselves in their life and it makes us feel good. Having said that, there's a little bit of an issue. And this issue comes up in an article that I read in The Guardian on social etiquette. And this article, which is like, as of the recording of this, is like 9 months old. So maybe some of the science on this is going to be a little bit outdated at some point by the time you listen to it. But the headline, this caught me hard. The headline is, People feel they don't owe anyone anything. People feel like they don't owe anyone anything. The rise in flaking out on social plans. And then the little sort of sub headline thing says, some call to drop out of events at late notice, even weddings and funerals. Self-care? Others call it selfishness. Right? People feel they don't owe anyone anything. The rise in flaking out of social plans. Some call to drop out of events at late notice, even weddings and funerals. Self-care. Others call it selfishness. Ooh, think if I had started with that. You listen, there would be people who would really want to listen to this, or there'd be people who are like, Rabbi, I'm done. I'm done with you. Cancel. Okay, but this was a really interesting article. I enjoyed reading it. So, this person, it starts off with this person who's a lawyer in Australia, and he talks about this idea of people canceling plans. He uses this line. It can be annoying, but I also understand the feeling of someone seeming like a good idea when it's in the future, then not feeling like going on the day. I have adjusted my mindset, so I almost expect 50% of everyday social plans not to happen. So I'd be curious from you, are you someone who's in that category of like the person who kind of cancels at the last second quite a bit? Or are you someone who feels like you're in this guy's circumstances, this guy Tim, this 44-year-old solicitor from Canberra, Australia? Um, do you feel like you're the one who gets canceled on like half the time? And is that a number that you feel is true? Um, but The Guardian did this thing. It's the UK, US, and Australia talking to different people about how they experience this phenomenon of flaking. So people canceling plans often at short notice. And this is because they're not in the mood. They feel demotivated. They feel tired or wanting to do something else instead. Okay. And this Tim character, he goes on to say, I think the main driver of flaking is that everyone is burnt out. So I think that's fascinating. And I kind of have to be with him on that because I know for me personally, as I have gotten older, I'm 42 right now. I do have a sense that maybe I get more socially exhausted than I used to. Um, but the thing about it is, I'm not as social as I used to be either, right? So why is it that the older I get and the less I would call it non-work, meaning outside of Kehillah, more personal life stuff, the less of that I seem to do, the more exhausted I am. Makes no sense. Except that in some ways it kind of does. So this article keeps going on and on talking about this. There are these professional event organizers, was that I was about to say? These professional event organizers and these business owners, they talk about how there's a rise in no-shows post-COVID, commitments for things like dentists, hairdressers, ticketed events, which, hey, I know a little bit about that, job interviews, business meetings. Um, there's this one person is a volunteer organizer from a nonprofit in Canada, and he says the number of no-shows to his events has increased several fold. And he's quoted as saying, at one point, I scheduled a lecture with 45 registrants only to have three arrive. Oh, that is awful. I could say, this isn't a humble brag. This isn't a gloat. I've never had it that bad. We've never had it that bad ever. I do remember one Kehillah class that I had that it was 6 people. They were super into the topic. All but one of them canceled. And the one person who canceled was someone who wasn't communicating much with me about their interest in the class. They RSVP'd, but like when I reached out to them about some things related to the class, I never heard back. Um, so yeah, but that's 6 in a class about a topic that's whatever. But 45 people for this lecture. I feel real bad for this person who organizes people in Canada. So there's this question of, well, why is that? Okay. And everybody kind of has their own opinion on it. The thing about getting older and what I've recognized is that as you get older, in like we're all gonna say that we disagree with this, and that's fine. I'm willing to take the heat on this. We actually have fewer total commitments. You'll say, but I'm committed to so many things. No, no, no. Just like hold on for a minute. Yes, you are committed to a lot of things, but in fewer categories, right? If you don't go out with multiple friend groups in a week, and the happy hour after work, and staying late at work, and going to see the family, right? You actually do have technically on paper fewer things going on, but the depth of the things that you have takes more out of you. Okay, so as you get older, your friend group tends to shrink, and you tend to value those, let's say, fewer numbers of friends in greater ways. You have fewer what we might call acquaintances, right? You have less acquaintance time, more concentrated time, and then that time takes more out of you. So think about when you were maybe in your early 20s. And this is tough because I'm probably talking to a very diverse group of ages right now. So I'm going to kind of play this from a couple of different directions. So you're someone who is in my age, let's say, or older. You remember in your 20s going out a lot, doing a lot, talking to a lot of friends, but they weren't necessarily your best friends, right? All the time, right? You had more acquaintances in your life. And that takes a lot less out of you, right? Even if you're a person who doesn't like small talk and stuff like that, you're still gonna be able to go through it a little bit, and it won't impact you. It won't feel like you're absolutely getting bludgeoned, right? And so you recover a little bit quicker from that. As you get older and your relationships become more concentrated, they take a lot out of you because you are more deeply committed to them, right? So, you go see your parents, let's say for a holiday when you're in your 20s, 30s, whatever. Okay, so maybe you have a great relationship with your parents, and so it doesn't take that much out of you. Okay. Now, fast forward however many years this is going to be, and now going to see your parents is about caretaking, right? You're making sure they're taking their medicine. You're making sure that the bills are getting paid. You're maybe dealing with siblings or other family members who feel like maybe you're not doing it the right way, right? That's still going to see your parents, but it's going to take a lot out of you in a different way. Also, people have kids, right? You have kids, and sure, you might have soccer practice with the kids and all these other like little social commitments, but like eventually soccer practice is over and you go home, right? It's kind of lightweight. But as your kids get older, even as they leave the house, you're dealing with things on a deeper and deeper level. They don't need you as much, they don't need you as often, but it's more and more consequential. And so that's what happens as you age. And that is part of why, as we get older, we tend to prioritize our time a little different. And as we prioritize our time, in a lot of ways, we become more what we call introverted. So that's an aging thing. Now, perhaps you're on that younger side and you're like, well, yeah, but like, why, why do I feel more exhausted? Like, why at 22 do I feel like I'm 62? And I've been hearing that from some of my younger Kehillah fam. And I think you, lovely Gen Z individuals, I think you might be going through something that's slightly different. I think you might be going through what I was talking about earlier in some ways of this sort of glorification of the introvert. So, this person Andrew from Bisbane who works in telecom sales in this article, he makes the same kind of uh comparison that I did. He says web comics and memes make a moral comparison to extroverts who are loud, obnoxious. Introverts are depicted as moral people who own cats and crochet. But our generation is also experiencing record high loneliness. So I think we shouldn't praise choosing loneliness or extreme levels of introversion. Okay, so I think that might actually be true. I think also there's this idea that flaking out, as they're calling it, canceling on plans at the last second, that it's connected to self-care and a lot of therapy speak. And I think that's another thing I've noticed with sort of the younger generation, right? A lot more use of therapy speak, which finds its way upward. Like a lot of times, slang is younger, and then it kind of rises up to the older folks like me. And I think there is a little bit of therapy speak around this idea of like self care. And if you're an introvert, you only have so much you can offer to the world, and being asked to offer more than that is just, that's unfair. That's just too much. You really need to care about yourself. You need to get your energy back. You need to like reclaim your mental health. And, I'm not going to push against that. I'm not going to push against someone's mental health. Of course not. You know who I am. It's Rabbi Patrick here. Like, that's not my scene. But I will say sometimes it does go a little bit far. There are people who have emotional issues, emotional wellness issues, and they need to go to therapy and they need to work on it. But part of that can include a little bit of exposure therapy. You do kind of force yourself to go out. You do kind of force yourself to have a conversation you don't want to have, right? You do kind of push it just a little bit, right? And just see what happens, right? Hiding doesn't necessarily help. Hiding from any problem doesn't help. Never has someone said, I hid from a problem, it went away, everything's fine. Now, I do sometimes believe you kind of have to duck a little bit. That's fair. But ultimately, you do have to deal with things. Um, and so you have to be careful too, because this constant exclusion thing, this becomes a problem. So I remember one time I was really upset because I wasn't invited to something. There was this professional thing. And I just felt like, why am I not invited? Like it blew my mind. I was angry. I was, my version of going off. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to phone a friend who is going to have some insight into this. And so I called my friend up and I told her the story, and I was so mad, and everybody else is having fun without me, right? Like that kind of thing. And she said these words to me. She said, "You don't get to be angry about not being invited to something you didn't want to be invited to anyway." Right? Yeah. Right? You weren't going to go to it, Patrick. You weren't interested in that. That's not your thing, right? You want to know that you are being forced to be included by some group of people, right? You want that feeling. You don't want to go. You're not going to gain anything from that. You're the one who's always saying, why the heck do we even bother with that thing? And now you're mad when no one invites you to it? Like, yeah, you don't respond to the emails about that thing, right? But now you're mad? And I was like, oh, this is why it's so awesome to have people in your life who get you and just get it, right? Because it's true. If you continuously exclude yourself, something really terrible happens. You don't get invited anymore. And that hurts a lot. I've been watching this show, Stephanie and I been watching this show called English Teacher, and there's a whole episode just about this problem of you're always saying no, so we just didn't bother to invite you this time, and now you're upset. And in some ways, I actually think that the sort of ending of that episode teaches the wrong moral, it teaches the wrong moral, right? So this character, I'm not going to give too much away, but this character is mad that he finds out everyone else did something without him. And it turns out it's a thing he doesn't like to do anyway. He's never good at doing this thing. And then at the end, the character who is like his best friend in this show says, well, but you're just not someone who wants to do that stuff. And he says to this character, I just want to know I'm always invited. And she says, okay, you're always invited, even if we're not going to see you. And I gotta tell you, I think that's a really unrealistic and unfair thing. Because you know what? I deserve to not be invited to something that I'm always going to say no to. Like, I'll own it. It's fine. And if it upsets me, then maybe I need to show up. Right? Honestly. That one was on me. Like, I didn't get to be upset about that. Right? If you never show up, you get mad that you don't get invited. Like, that is kind of on you. So that's kind of a problem we have. Like, what happens when there's this social consequence? And it's challenging. I get it. I get it. There are people also going back to the sort of therapy language. There's people who will say that it's ableist to be asked to go to things that you say you want to go to and then will cancel on. Now, there's totally legitimate reasons to cancel on things. Your kid gets sick, you get sick, you miss the plane. Like, sure, there are sometimes reasons why you can't go to something. Um, and yeah, so I'm totally with people on that. At the same time, though, we tend to hide in our tents. That's just what we sort of do. Restaurants are now having this problem where people are RSVPing and then canceling at the last second. And it's by a huge, like record numbers. Because what happens is that people say, oh, I might want to go have dinner at this place on Thursday at 7. So they go on ahead and put that down. And then they just cancel like an hour before the meal. So now that restaurant, they've lost that customer. That's money that's literally being taken out of somebody's pocket, right? There was an expectation that there would be a party of 4 or whatever, and those, people, they were gonna spend like 75 bucks a piece or whatever, right? Well, that's $350 that just went yoink because it was like, "Oh, but I have feelings. Oh, but, whatever," right? And that just stinks, right? Because how is the chef supposed to pay his rent? Right? How is the owner supposed to pay the landlord for that building, right? And that's a problem. Again, I have certainly canceled restaurant reservations at the last second because something's come up. I get it. 100% with you. But sometimes we're just kind of in the tent and we're deciding that that's okay. Um Is this a problem? Are we in some ways eating away at the fabric of relationships, as Tristan, age 38 from Surrey, had to say in this article? Yeah. Yeah, I'm worried about that. I'm worried about people losing out on relationships because they're just people in the tent, right? They don't feel like an Esau character. They're not the extrovert. They're not the hunter. They're not the one who goes out. Yeah, yeah, right. Uh-huh. But also, we have to be careful about being flaky, right? And so there's things that we have done as Kehillah that in some ways actually help with that. So first of all, we don't offer a lot. Really, if you think about it. Like if you look at the calendar of just about any synagogue, what are they gonna have? They're gonna have Friday night service, they're gonna have Saturday morning service, they're gonna have Torah study, they're gonna have adult ed, they're gonna have, 5, 6 different havarot based on age. This is the women's group, this is the men's group, this is the older people's group, this is the next gen young adult professional, whatever they like to call it group. This is the whatever, young parents group, right? And then they'll have like do Shabbat at people's houses. So you'll have groups for that, right? And it's all based on this idea that you need to build these relationships so that people will keep coming back. It's the small group phenomenon. It was actually popularized by Rick Warren and the evangelical Christian churches in America, this small group concept. And it was then sort of in some ways adapted more and more by synagogue life. I mean, synagogues have always had different groups, the retirees group, men's group, whatever. So that's always been a constant. But this push more and more towards these small groups is definitely part of it. And look, we have it, right? We have, a retirees group, an older adult group. We have people who informally kind of gather, but these aren't like programs that we do. These are just kind of hangs that people have. Um, but in any case, we don't offer a ton of that, right? Certainly not as much as others. And there's people who would say, like, well, but if you offered more, more people would come. Yeah. But we're also in this post COVID, people wanting to hang out at home more thing. Like, we had some friends invite us out Saturday night. And we ended up saying, like, for some reason, like the particular place we were going to go, it wasn't going to work out. So we had to come up with an alternative plan. And I was like, well, hey, why don't you come over to our house for Korean tacos? So I, threw a chuck roast in the Instapot. I had the stuff all ready to make Korean tacos, and we hung out on the back porch, right? And I feel bad, like, we didn't make a restaurant reservation and cancel or whatever, but I felt bad because I'm like, I like going out. I like going to do stuff. But even then I'm like, "Oh, man, but just the cost and, just dealing with lots of people and all that." Yeah, I get it. So apply that to synagogue life. And that's where a lot of people are. And so with us here at Kehillah, we keep it pretty simple, right? You're gonna have, two Shabbat evenings a month. One's a service, one's not. You're gonna have a Saturday morning Torah study once a month, right? We do have the big events, the big parties, stuff like that. That's gonna be around holidays. Yeah. And we have opportunities to help people and do things like that, but you don't have to like get together as a big group. Like one person can help mow someone's lawn. 5, 6 people can donate, and that's going to pay for the groceries for somebody. Or we find someone who's an expert at something and we say, hey, anytime someone has an issue in that category, why don't you be the person who helps them? That's Kehillah Cares, right? I think that what we've done when you sort of add all of these choices up, right? No building, which means we don't have to do a ton of fundraisers, which means we don't have to have a ton of events to fundraise. Um, 3 Shabbat oriented events a month, 2 at night, 1 in the day. Not having a Hebrew school, just having, Edva and I handle that for bar and bat mitzvah. All of these things that we do that involve being together, caring for others, having spiritual community, having a sense of Jewish identity, all of these things, but not asking too much of people's time. I think what we've created, summing it all up, is a synagogue for tired people, right? Because you're tired. I get it. We have these horrible machines that we carry in our pockets that tell us the news every 5 milliseconds, right? And that's tiring. Oh my gosh, if I see another ad for another candidate for the upcoming election, I am going to lose my mind. Can't go anywhere without getting, hit with some kind of message. Buy this, vote for this, do that. Oh, you're not doing this. Oh, you really need to take care of this and that and this person. And then in this country, there's this. Yeah, right. So we have that humming in the background all the time. No shock that when Rabbi Patrick sends out the Monday newsletter email, people are like, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock on a Monday and I'm already ready for the weekend. And I just don't know if I have it in me. I get it. I get it. Because we're a synagogue for tired people, right? You're tired of the world looking the way it is. That's why we have Kehillah Cares. You're tired of a system that asks for more and more and more money to pay for more and more and more things, bigger buildings, nicer walls, fancier this. Yeah, you're tired of that. So what do? We rent little spaces. We hang out at the rabbi's house. We hang out at each other's homes, right? You don't want to be in the synagogue with like 200 people, right? You're just not, nah, yeah, no big deal. There's like 20, right? There's 15 here. There's, maybe there's a large event, there's like 115, right? But you're going to hang out with your like 15 people that are kind of your group. Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is kind of a synagogue for tired people. I understand. Yeah, and maybe you're on the more extroverted side, and maybe you're kind of the cheerleader who makes all of these kinds of things happen. Yeah, I get it. Right, we appreciate you, goodness. Um, but yeah, we're kind of a synagogue for tired people sometimes. So tired people, here's what I have to say to you. So you are a person of the tent, right? You're like you're like our ancestor Jacob there, right? You're not an Esau type of character, but let's remember there's a difference between being in the tent and hiding in the tent, right? A person of the tent, yeah, totally, but Jacob had adventures. He did stuff, right? He was kind of a big deal actually. Um, and, just because you're in a tent doesn't mean you have to stay in a tent. And also, it doesn't have to be your entire identity, right? Like if you tell yourself all the time, "Oh, I'm an introvert." Yeah, you're right. You will be introverted if you keep telling yourself, "I am an introvert." It's like I was watching an interview with the author of the book Atomic Habits. And one of the things he said is, imagine two people who are in a room and someone brings in a carton of cigarettes and they lay it on a table and they say to each of these people, "Would you like a carton of cigarettes?" The person who's never smoked before, doesn't smoke, would say, "No, thanks, I don't smoke." The person who's trying to quit smoking, they won't say, "I don't smoke." They'll say, "I'm trying to quit." Okay, well, what does that say? That says, I'm a person who smokes. I'm just not smoking right this moment. Okay. And then think about the person who said, "I don't smoke." Now, it could be at some point in the past they smoked, but their identity is, "I don't smoke." Okay. If the person who is quitting smoking were to change their identity by just a few words, instead of saying, "I'm trying to quit," if they say, "I don't smoke," which is true, right? If you are quitting, you are a person who used to smoke and does not. That is absolutely true. That is not an unfair statement, right? If they change their identity just by that little bit, there's actually evidence that shows that it will be easier for them to stick to the habit of not smoking. If you're a person who says, "I want to go to the gym," don't say, "I'm trying to exercise." Say, "I exercise." Because it's true. There was some time in the past when you didn't, and you currently do. But you are in current zone. You don't live in the past. So you exercise. You are a person who exercises or whatever, right? So I would say to my friends of the tent who hide in the tent, right? You might need to change your identity a little bit, right? Just tell yourself and tell others, "I'm a person who goes out, right? I'm a person who participates in my local community," right? That kind of a thing. That's one atomic habit, so to speak. Because at the same time that we're prioritizing all of this self-care, chilling out, staying home, whatever, we have record loneliness. What I don't want is a future where we have so focused on self care that we stop caring about other people. Now, big asterisks next to this. If you're a person who is just dealing with crisis after crisis after crisis, if you're someone who it's like, "I live on the edge all the time and I just need a moment of peace." Yeah, I would actually say the introvert extrovert thing, that's not your situation. Your situation is you're a person in crisis who needs help from community. That's like the group of people who you go see and you tell them, "Hey, here's what's going on," right? That's a completely different problem than someone who's just a little pooped out from a long day at work or who doesn't want to go out on a Saturday morning from 10 to noon or go out and see friends on a Sunday night for drinks or whatever, right? Completely different thing. So, wrapping it all up, we are the people of the tent. That does not mean that we hide in the tent. Doesn't mean that the tent is our identity. It just means it's a little bit of an orientation, right? Are you an introvert? Maybe. Are you a person who goes out sometimes? Yes. Even better. Okay. Do not sacrifice yourself to commitments that are harmful in some way, but maintain the commitments that are important because you should not prioritize self care to the point that you only care about yourself. And also, and particularly for younger people, but not exclusively, record high loneliness happens when we celebrate being alone. So get out there, do stuff, touch grass, make it happen. Kehillah's here for you. We got a lot going on, and I promise it is, in fact, a synagogue for tired people, just like you. Thanks.